welcome to Spill the Tarot Tea. But today I have Havana with me from Sparkle Divine Tarot and Sparkle Divine Creations. And we are going to discuss all the tarot tea topics. I am Krista Flute. I'm Lakota and Cajun tarot reader and the creator of the Landback Tarot and Oracle of Colonization. And if you've watched the channel before, then you know a little bit more about me than that. So let's get to Havana.
Hi, I'm Havana, as Krista said. I have a YouTube channel, Sparkle Divine Tarot. I also have an Etsy shop, Sparkle Divine Creations. Right now, I'm kind of just vibing. Normally on my YouTube channel, I'll do deck reviews and discuss tarot topics if they are pressing my conscious enough. I will sometimes do a little rant on there, but I try to keep my channel focused on decks that are created by people of color. When I started the channel, there was a severe need in the market for decks created by people of color. And in the 3 years that I have been doing YouTube, I've seen a huge growth, and I want to keep spurring that growth on. But yeah,
and you are spurring it on with indie deck review, with your channel. And if people have watched or heard before, seeing you discuss and show these decks helped me believe it is wanted out there. And it inspired me also because my son was so impressed that I knew I had to finish this time. And it's really important. It's really important to have these discussions. And I'm really thankful for the work you do on that.
I'm thankful for your presence here in the community. I was honored enough to get a prototype copy of Landback, and when I opened it up, it made me cry because these are stories that people don't want to hear. People don't want to tell these stories. Sometimes people are ashamed or afraid to tell these stories, but they're stories nonetheless that people have experienced and are still experiencing, and they're stories that need to be told. Otherwise, they disappear to the sands of time. So
they do. And it is important. All right. What are you drinking in your tea today?
Oh, so in my tea, it's already pretty warm here in California. So I've just got some iced tea with lemonade, Arnold Palmer.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's pretty warm here. We're dealing with the wildfires up here. So it's smoky and warm, and I wanted something cool and refreshing.
For sure. We've had a very cool summer, and we still are. Hence, I'm pretty covered. I'm drinking hot tea. I have chamomile tea that a friend had gathered, and honey, which I helped gather, which was exciting.
That's amazing. I wish I had that around here.
For sure. It is definitely one of the nice things about having some space, outdoor space.
Yeah.
And not something I used to have, so I really appreciate it. But yeah.
I would love in my future to have just space where I can cultivate food, fruits, vegetables, plants, just grow something. I think that's an important aspect of life that people take for granted. And watching something grow from seed to something that you can nourish your body with is really a grounding experience that helps connect us to our purpose and our littleness in this world.
Very much, very much. Okay, so let's move into hot tarot takes. Is there a hot take you have on a tarot card or something in tarot that you would like to share with folks out there to help broaden experiences or thoughts or perceptions?
So there's a few cards that I always struggle with in tarot, but the Lover's card is one that recently I've seen people approach differently, which I appreciate because a lot of times we see a heterosexual couple and they are doing some amorous activities, or traditionally with the Rider-Waite, you see the angel and the couple is on one side or the other. But in my personal journey of self-discovery and living with mental health illnesses, I find that the Lover's card is a lot more relevant to me when I see it tied with learning how to love yourself and how to work with the things that make you who you are, whether you like them or not, they're still a part of who you are. So learning to come to terms with that, learning how to work with those aspects of yourself so that they can make you a stronger person in the long run. I didn't grab it. There's a couple of decks that I have where they do have a solitary Lover's card, and that's the focus, is love yourself. And once you love yourself, then you're able to make better partnerships because you can express healthy boundaries and you won't feel like you're being taken advantage of.
Yes, I think Next World Tarot has that symbolized really well. And the Mermaid Tarot by Lisa Robinson also has that, like, looking in the mirror imagery. I'm also a big fan of it, because when we can do that, when we can like look at our own truths and believe in ourselves and have that confidence in ourselves and work on our own self relationship, then that improves the relationships we have with others. It improves who we choose in a relationship, which brings us back to the choice, personal choice aspect of the Lovers, because we choose healthier partners when we think we deserve that.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah, I really do like that. I feel that way too. I picked the Three of Swords, and this is a self-love tarot, so that seemed relevant. And I chose this card because it didn't have the heart in the swords in it. My background's in astrology first, and so the Three of Swords is Saturn in Libra, and Libra is about relationships and balance, but Saturn's about responsibility. And this is going to tie into your Lover's assessment. I think one of the key lessons in the Three of Swords, in both, what's my note here, healing and growing, is that personal responsibility. And even when somebody's done something that's really painful or difficult for us, we have personal responsibility in how we're going to deal with it. Sometimes in, what we, our contributions to the pain. Sometimes we didn't, but sometimes we did. And so I think that Saturn aspect of the Three of Swords is a really key aspect to seeing this card beyond just blanket heartbreak, but like, what are you going to do with the difficulty that you are dealing with? How are you going to take responsibility and balance out these relations? So that's my hot take on that one.
I like that. I agree. I Three of Swords is one I also had a problem with, only because I was personally offended by a tarot reading I did before a date where I got the Three of Swords. So that wasn't a very good a good reading to have before a date. It did turn out badly, but what I realized with that was it's not about the heartbreak. Couldn't have been heartbroken with someone I didn't know. I was disappointed more than anything else. And so when I see the Three of Swords, I read that as disappointment. And then when you tie in with the numerology, it's about growth. So Where can you grow?
Yeah.
How can you learn from the disappointment? And like you said, what actions could you have taken to avoid the disappointment? And yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely,
Or sometimes you can't avoid it, but so, how are you going to respond
yeah.
to, yeah. 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 All right. So the big part that, we're excited to hear about is what is Havana's pet spiritual Karen peeve?
Okay. Well, it's only Wednesday, right?
Yeah. Can you narrow down?
I So this week the R Black deck came out, and this is a deck that I have been waiting on for like 10 years. And he hand cut the cards, he collated the deck and made the boxes. Um, and I saw a lot of people disappointed because it wasn't mass market quality. Um,
Huh.
it's a pet. Go ahead.
I was just reacting to that.
It's a pet.
It's handmade. That's wow.
A lot of time. 1,000 decks doing that all by hand. That's a lot of time. I could never, ever. And so people were complaining about the price of the deck not being equal to the quality of the deck. And I really have a pet peeve with the fact that in the indie market, this Amazon 2-day Prime customers always right attitude seems to be seeping into the indie deck market, and people forget that it's indie. These are artists.
Yes.
This is their time. They aren't covered by corporations or insurance companies. They're not making billions of dollars. They are individuals who are expressing themselves through art, and they're entitled to charge whatever they want for art. The same people who would be asking for living wages would also turn around and deny an artist to ask for their living wages and say, well, you don't
Totally.
that much. And it's like, but I do. And so do you. You should also be demanding better wages for yourself so that we can all afford the nice things in life. So I guess
I should have demanded a better wage for myself on my deck.
yeah, people take advantage, they feel entitled to things. I think I was thinking about this question this morning, and I was saying that it feels like people have run out of land to colonize, so now they're colonizing people's time through capitalism. And I I'm not here for that.
Yes. That's really disappointing. And I ran into similar things as a deck creator. It wasn't comments about quality, because I didn't have the talent to print and cut myself. Holy cow, I'm so impressed. But I did deal with white privilege and Amazon expectations. And I just wrapped up dealing with it. I'm getting emails and comments and messages regularly from some of my backers who didn't follow the outlines. My Kickstarter is only available in Canada and the US. That's because Canada has pricey postal service, and when you have a cost that's going to be unpredictable in Kickstarter, it can really mess up your finances. So I had to put that limit on it. And white people from European countries, even though I made alternative plans for them outside of Kickstarter, which several people followed, there's some who they're mad about that. They backed it anyway. They lied to me and said things like, I've never done Kickstarter before. I didn't know. And I look and they're like super backers. And I was like, how many creators have you done this to? How many BIPOC decks have you collected to make your collection look anti-racist or whatever, but you're demanding of BIPOC creators to like bow to your white privilege.
Yeah.
And that's that very same thing. Like I demand this of you because I'm the customer and I'm right. And I'm used to throwing around all my care and privilege wherever I go, and it's accepted, and you're going to accept it too. And I don't know why I wasn't expecting that. I think because the work I've done in the past has been so specifically for other BIPOC people that I've not had to deal with that. Like regalia making, you know, I sometimes get white people saying, make me power regalia. And all I have to do is be like, no.
Not for you.
So this was really different. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the side of deck creating. Even in mass market companies, sometimes when they take on indie artists, that's the side that you don't see. People only care about the fulfillment of their investment.
Yes.
But behind that is a lot of work, a lot of time. There's a lot of ignorance you have to deal with, and it's stressful enough when you want to give good customer service, but when the customers are demanding things that are like impossible for you to do, your hands are kind of tied, and it's like you're asking me to do labor, emotional labor, physical labor, financial labor that I cannot do for you. And it's
Yeah.
yeah.
For me, it was the emotional labor that was the trigger to stop and say no. That's what it was. I was like, I can't do this. But what I can do is be that person who says no, and be that person you yell and scream at. And as a light-skinned BIPOC person, that's some of my responsibility. And like Three of Swords, that's some of my responsibility in that is to be the person they're going to yell and scream at, because they aren't going to be as terrible to me.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that experience, but I'm never afraid to tell people no. I have a customer who I made some stuff for, and they were unhappy with it because it doesn't look like the picture. And I was planning on remaking it for them, but I said, no, why? What I sent you is what I made. I can't control the way this art is. It's a free flowing form of art, so it's never going to look like the picture ever. And I said, no, here, take your money back. And I'm not going to be able to satisfy you, so take your money back. I don't need that business.
Yeah. Yeah. And it felt good doing that, but also scary.
It is scary because we have, unfortunately, in our society, financial security is not guaranteed. And so you want to feel comfortable and secure in the choices you're making, but to actively say, I'm not going to use this, and it might it might pull the rug out from under my feet. It is a scary thing. And I wish people didn't have to make those choices.
Yeah. Yeah. And I naively wasn't expecting it. I naively thought that if people were going to be attracted to a deck that political, they would get some of that. But and I feel that way about the Art Black deck. If you want a deck that's handmade, I don't even know how you think that it's going to look exactly like a mass market deck.
I wouldn't want it to look like a mass market deck. I was I had an interaction with someone on Facebook, and they were saying that the deck was only like $30 quality because they had mass market decks that were less than that, and this indie deck was not equal. And so I said to the person, well, sell me your deck. If you're unhappy with it, I'll give you full cost plus shipping. Sell it to me. And to that, they said, no, I'm not going to sell you the deck. And I said, so then it has value to you as much, if not more, than what you paid for it. So you're
That
making
is a
sense.
brilliant point.
She didn't like that, but I don't care. I'm used to making people unhappy.
Me too. Me too. Um, although I care a lot more than I tend to let on. Uh, I hide a very, very sensitive moon placement. Very sensitive moon placement in my very fire air chart. I got this 29 degrees Pisces moon. And it just hides right behind my Aries stellium and runs off to cry privately.
That's okay. I think it'd be impossible to not care, because if you didn't care, then it wouldn't bother you, and you wouldn't go out.
Yeah,
You would go out of your way to make things right. So
I like that assessment. Yeah, it probably does have a lot to do with the passionate Aries stellium. It's like it's defending that moon. But yeah, have there been other decks where you saw a lot of this coming out, a lot of this white privilege?
oh gosh, a lot of decks by people of color, because a lot of decks by people of color, they ask for more money for their decks, because why the hell not? And I see a lot of people saying, well, that's too much for a deck. I see a lot of people saying, well, that's too much for a deck. When I got Courtney Alexander's Dust to Onyx Tarot, she was asking $170 at the time, and that was a Kickstarter. And there was a lot of backlash about how expensive that was, and that no other decks on the market were asking that much money. But again, I default to, if they asked $1,000 for a deck, and I felt like that deck was justified for me to have in my collection, and I could afford to pay $1,000 for it, I would pay $1,000 for it. I'm not, although I have quite a few decks, I have been strategic in my collection. I'm not buying just to fill up my shelf. Most of my deck collection at this point is populated by decks that mean more than just the images on the cards. They're supporting artists. They're supporting social justice work, even if it's just through tarot. People forget that tarot is political. And as much as people want to get away from that, you can't. It's political because it represents life, and life is political. And as long as people feel like everyone isn't entitled to the same justices, it's always going to be political. So
it has full, like, justice, the emperor, the empress, the hierophant. It has politics written into it because it affects our everyday life.
absolutely. Yeah, I hear people talk about taking out the negative cards, and I'm all like, that must be so nice to lift light where you don't have to deal with any negative experiences. How do you grow? How do you get not a thicker skin, but how do you become weathered to the point that you can experience those things and get through them, without being destroyed by them? I don't know, but yeah, if an artist, like I said, if an artist asked for $1,000 and I could justify that and afford it, I would. I have no problem paying what someone's asking me to pay them for their time and energy, because who am I to put a limit on what that person feels their time and energy is worth?
And I think it's a good point too. Like, I've looked at the decks. I've looked at the Dust to Onyx deck. It's gorgeous. I've seen it on your channel. I can't afford it, and I don't feel angry about it. I've recommended it to two friends who I knew would love it and could afford it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's important. Like, it's an amazing deck. It should be out there. And for those who can afford it, or who can say, you know what, I'm not going to buy these three other decks. I'm going to put this money into this deck that I really love. And because I really believe in supporting BIPOC artists, that's what you do.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been some Kickstarter decks I couldn't afford, and I didn't bitch about the price. I hit the back because you can believe in it button.
I think people forget that button. I do, because I'm always like, I'm here for the deck. But I mean, realistically, no one needs more than one deck. Honestly, you only need one deck to read with. And so the ability to have more than one deck is definitely, it's a luxury. But every single person who has a YouTube channel, who has an Instagram account, no matter how many followers you have, has a platform, and they can share and support through those methods of social media. So even if you can't afford the deck, or it's not for you, because there's a lot of times where I see people say, well, I don't think this deck is for me. Fine, share it. Still share it for people who it is for. There's lots of ways to support artists without, if you cannot support them financially, you can support them in other ways.
Yeah, very much. On Indie Deck Review, I see all kinds of decks, and as a minimalist, very few of them are for me.
Mm-hmm.
And because I sort of have a maximum number of decks I think I can look after and deal with. But they're gorgeous and they're amazing. And I, want to say something nice about them for the creators, and for the algorithm, so other people see it. Something you can do too, like you can as simply as say really nice things about a deck that you like that isn't for you, and the algorithms work in a way where something that small can be a contribution to it being seen.
Absolutely.
All right. So hit the deck. Is there something you are just done with, tired of seeing in tarot or the tarot world?
I may need a little bit to think about this one.
From I hit the deck, and I've pulled out some cards. A thing I'm really tired of is biracial, always meaning BIPOC plus white. Because like BIPOC is not a race. There's not like white people and non-white people. And I'm really tired of it. And I think it's a really problematic message. Not just because we forget that there's multiple races out there, and multiple peoples out there, but because it reverberates afterwards. When you're a biracial person, they expect you to be biracial like me and be half white, because who else would you marry but a white person? And there's so many biracial folks out there, including my oldest daughter, where that other side isn't white. And in my dating life, I've dated outside my race many times, although I've never dated a white person other than in my teens. Um, and it's something that annoys me. And it also speaks to me of like how far we have to go in diversity, that it it feels tokenized to me. And I'm going to throw in a brown person, and I'm going to throw in a brown person. And the same with the Three of Cups. How many times there's like two white people and a person of color to represent that diversity in Three of Cups. And I want the twos and threes to look like Mari's deck, where we have three shades of brown. I want diversity in tarot to take that next step and say that being biracial isn't, whether it's as a person or as a couple, isn't by default white.
Mm-hmm. I agree. After you did your review, an indie deck review of the Lou, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. I decided to go back and revise my review of the Divine Muses because I wasn't happy with my review. I was on a deadline and I couldn't express fully my disappointment because I touched on it. I didn't share the cards that I had a problem with, but yeah, I don't like people claiming diversity when diversity is basically tokenizing. Like, oh, this person, this is a diverse deck because there's 5 people of color in it, and we've hit all of the main. There's an Asian person, there's a Black person, there's a Latina person, there's an like, that's not diversity. That is literally tokenization.
It is.
One of the cards in that deck, the Divine Muses, that kind of touched a nerve for me was they have Josephine Baker portrayed as the muse of dance, I believe it is. And I see this a lot. I see Josephine Baker's image being used a lot for free spirit, dance, sassy. That is only a part of who she was. She was an incredible woman. She did a lot for social justice work. She was a spy for the French resistance. And I almost never see those aspects of her featured in decks like that. You see a lot of people of color being recognized for their one thing that makes them relevant to colonized nations, colonized country, like, colonizers. They're relevant because the colonizers can feel, I don't know why they choose some people and not others to
because they achieved high levels of whiteness. Where I grew up in Kingston, Ontario, Joseph and Molly Brandt are held up as, these Mohawks, these Indigenous people that Kingston wants to honor. Their father was an Indian agent, a white Indian agent. He made his son Joseph an Indian agent and chief, and Joseph and Molly were slave owners. And yeah, people want to hold up BIPOC folks when we achieve levels of white accomplishment.
Mm-hmm.
And they're an example of a really negative white accomplishment. But like, I want us to be held up, not just when we become doctors, not just when we become lawyers or politicians or, famous in some way. I want us to be held up when we're fighting for ourselves, when, we're a struggling single parent, when we fought against homelessness. I'm tired of our greatness being measured by how much we accomplished in the colonial world.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you said it better than I could. Yeah, I I know it's a double-edged sword because you always hear, oh, so and so was the first person of color to do this, or so and so was the first BIPOC person to do this. And in the back of my head, I'm always like, well, how do you know the first person in your history? But
Yeah.
like it, because you made a calculated and very measured effort to destroy written records of other nations, we can only go by what your history tells us is true, even if it's not true. So
Yeah.
that is a deep-seated thing that everybody, even BIPOC people, have to recognize, that their history is only like the history we are familiar with is written by one person, like one group, the colonizers.
Yeah. And I
Um,
think this is a great example. Like, they'll talk about like the first Black doctor. Ancient Egypt had surgery.
yeah,
So there is clearly a lot of Black doctors.
yeah, yeah,
Like, yeah.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Don't get me started on that. I I've worked in the medical. I spent 20 years working in the medical field, and I don't work in the medical field for a reason. But yeah, that's a whole different tangent on a different day for a different channel. But I I agree with you. I want people. I I agree with you. I want people, if they're going to say that their deck is diverse, because diverse and representation are not the same. And even when you say, oh, well, this is representation because I threw these people in here, how? What's the context? Why are they in this deck? How are they relevant to this deck? Oh, wow, it's a brown person, it's an indigenous person, it's an Asian person. Cool, but why are they in this deck? Are they only in this deck because they are BIPOC? Because then there's a problem there. Because we are more than our, I don't even know what you call it, our BIPOC identities. We are more than that. And if you're going to include, especially well-known people, there needs to be a relevance for their for their context in the inclusion of a deck. So,
And you need to think about what it says. And the Lua tarot and the Muse. What was the one you did?
divine
Pardon
muses.
me?
Divine muses.
Divine Muses by the same creator. Both did this like hugely. And the other thing I would say about it is, it feels like when white creators put in 25, 30, a quarter to a third of BIPOC folks, they feel they've achieved diversity.
Mm-hmm.
And, a quarter to a third of BIPOC folks, they feel they've achieved diversity.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that's a too low a bar.
When I first heard you use the word global diversity, it was like, bing, that makes so much sense. Because it's always something that's bothered me here, especially in the US. You hear the term minority, and I'm like, I mean, if you add us all up together, statistically, it's impossible for us to be minorities. So I like the term global diversity, and definitely having people, BIPOC people, be more than 60% of a deck is my new bar. Like, that's my new standard now, because a lot of times I do these decks for Indie Deck Review, and we do the real world review, and people are like, oh, this deck is so diverse. And I'm like, I just did the numbers here, and statistically, this is not diverse. Even if you're not using that standard of 30% versus 60% global, it's still not a diverse deck. You're still creating the deck with the lens of white supremacy. the white people have to be the most populous in this deck. And I
Yeah.
don't know what it's like to I don't have the I can't. I don't know what it's like to feel like I have to be in control of this thing I'm creating, because my image has to my image and representation has to be the majority of this thing. I don't know what that's like. It's never been something I've ever experienced, which is why having so many decks by BIPOC people in my collection is a revelation. It's a hobby, but it's a revelation for me. It's very rare outside of tarot for me to see BIPOC people be the majority of any type of media. And even when it's media created by BIPOC people, it's always created with the lens of white supremacy. Oh, this person's important because they made this much money. Jay-Z and Beyonce, oh, they're the new face of, I don't remember the jewelry company. God, I feel stupid now because I don't know. I think it's Harry Winston, maybe. It's a diamond company. They're the new face of this diamond company, modeling diamonds that are blood diamonds. It's like, okay, well, there's a problem putting them up on a pedestal, but also they're blood diamonds. Beyonce and Jay-Z may not have known that, but the company did. And the company chose them to be the new spokespeople or faces or models for a reason.
Quite on purpose, probably. Yeah.
Yes. So.
Yeah. And back to the like global majority and global diversity. When we make up a third of a deck, you know, that's where it becomes really problematic, because you have a couple of these and a couple of these and a couple of these. When the decks that hit me hardest, I got it, I passed it on pretty quickly, was oh man, now I'm gonna forget the name.
I know which deck you're talking
about. We both dislike it so much we can't remember the name. So sorry, you go again.
No, I'm torn with that deck because it was the images that I saw for that deck were the first time I realized that indie decks were a thing. And I followed that deck for years. I found it on Pinterest. And then when it arrived, I was really excited about it. But because I didn't know enough about the fairy tales and mythos that were being portrayed, I didn't know the problems with that deck. And when it was pointed out to me, it's kind of like, oh man, guys, could have been great.
Yeah. I got it. The Hierophant card is one of my nation's deities. The story on it was fairly accurate. It was a good short summary. And so I was like, okay, I'll get it. But I did know a number of the stories in there and knew they were wrong. And I had friends from who knew some of the other stories, and I asked them for them. And they were very gracious and shared their stories with me, and they were wrong. Sometimes in really, really big ways.
Yeah.
And I sat down and I divided that deck out by race. And sat down and I divided that deck out by race. And there were so few Black people in that deck.
Yeah. There were a couple of African stories.
So few. There was some, but there were so few. Mm-hmm. Some of them were problematic. The John Henry one was problematic, especially being like an American folktale. Americans don't get my stories. They don't get your stories. that's not okay. Um, yeah, and I think that's what surprised me. I was like, if this deck is like showing around the world, like how is there so little representation from Africa? It was still primarily white.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, and it was by a mixed person of color.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that's the thing. That's the thing when we're mixed and with white and um have various levels of white passing. Um, so it's not wrong to say a lot of us uphold whiteness.
Mm-hmm. I mean, a lot we were taught to. It's literally in our
Yeah.
education systems to uphold whiteness. Yeah, and it took critical, constructive criticism of that deck for me to realize the problems with it. Because I was, like I said, I was just so excited to get it. But you know, it's one of those things where you sit back and you look and you're like, it's not, it's not as great as I thought it would be, and maybe
Yeah.
even a little hurtful with the, like, I recognize what you were trying to do, but you missed the mark. And that's another one of the, that's one of the ones where I think, I wonder, because originally it was an indie deck, how much of that was meant to, was because of the publishers. I don't like,
Yeah.
it makes me question, because a lot of it was not the guidebook for the specific deck, and then the book, the companion book, they're not, they don't tell the same stories. The guidebook focuses more on the tarot.
That's the only one I got, but it does reference those stories incorrectly.
It okay, so yeah, there, and then the big companion book, it elaborates, and the elaborations are a problem with,
Okay.
yeah.
The short ones are a problem too. So, you know, I'm going to, I think we do see decks change and sometimes become more white appeasing when they move to mass market. But the guidebook that came with it was problematic. I didn't get the big one because I wanted to see the deck before I got the big one. And so I didn't get it. I actually bought two because I got one for a friend.
No. I actually did
Yeah.
I did a giveaway on that deck. I bought two as well. I still have mine. I'll probably keep it. I don't use it, but I keep it for sentimental purposes, only because it was my introduction to indie decks, and now I'm like, I feel like I'm a champion for indie deck creators. But that doesn't mean
You
that
are
we
a champion.
that doesn't mean that we can't say, hey, I appreciate your effort, but here's where you missed the mark, and maybe next time get some consultations, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I afterwards wondered like, this creator worked for Disney. What was I really expecting?
That's true. That is true. Oh, Disney. People are paid well to research these things that they decide to turn into multi-billion-dollar money makers, and they know exactly what they're doing because they're in it to make. Yeah, I wish I hadn't grown up with Disney. Even as a kid, I was always cynical, so
Yeah.
there was some cynicism there in certain things, but like I didn't have I didn't have Tiana as a kid. Like my Disney princess that I followed the most was Little Mermaid, because living with depression, even then, even if I didn't have a name for it, as a kid, I still had depression. And so the whole wanting to be like other people and not being that
Yeah.
really was a thing for me. But I think if I had had something like Tiana growing up, it probably would have been even more, I don't know, I won't say damaging, because my identity to Ariel wasn't her red hair and white skin. It was her not
Her
feeling
emotion.
her emotion. But if I'd seen Tiana, who had skin like me and whose family came from the South like mine did, I probably wouldn't have been as cynical about it as
Like to bring up another issue, another hit the deck issue.
I think really what we talked about is the thing I have the most problem with.
Yeah.
I recently, when I got rid of all of the decks that I had like 60 decks that I got rid of, that I sold. My main deciding factor in those decks was how many people of color are in it. Is it a main deciding factor in those decks was how many people of color are in it. Is it a mass market deck? Because I'm not saying that I'm not going to keep buying mass market decks, but the decks that I had when I started creating, I bought because they were available. But now that there are other options, that need those decks, then and publishers can be doing a better job.
Yeah, they can be. Those are the decks I tend to pass on also. And it's not necessarily conscious. I just stopped using them around the 3 to 6 month mark.
Yeah.
Because their newness wore off.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm a lot more aware of that now. In my buying. And it loses it for me. It was exciting when it was new. I made concessions for it because it was new, and my heart knew better and stopped reaching for it. I struggle
just because you or I bitch about a deck because it doesn't meet our standards or we don't resonate with it doesn't mean that it won't resonate for somebody else. I mean, there are problems. I mean, if you dig deep enough, everything has some problematic issue, because at the end of the day, everything's rooted in capitalism. So there's always going to be something that you find if you dig deep enough. That doesn't mean that there aren't still redeeming qualities about the decks that we may not resonate with. Like the Divine Muses, it's a beautiful deck. The Lua deck, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful aesthetic. It's just for me and you, those reasons aren't reasons that we can resonate with those decks. But it doesn't mean that
exactly. I passed the Lua deck on like 2 days after I reviewed it. To like my auntie's daughter-in-law. She was like, "You've given everyone a tarot deck but me." I was like, okay, I'll find one for you. And I gave her two. I gave her the Mermaid Tarot because I was like, I'm giving you this one because you're going to love it, and I like it. And I gave her the Lua Tarot. I was like, I have major political issues with this deck. You're not a very political person. So I think you'll probably be able to let it go and really enjoy the art. Mm-hmm. And she said she could. She's like, she figured out, even though she's not a political person, figured out what cards I had an issue with right away.
Yeah.
That said a lot to me too, because like, this is not a political person at all.
I a lot.
Yeah. And
I think maybe I can add to the hit the deck is that people need to stop excusing offensive artwork because of the era in which it was created. I hate that argument, because unless the deck was created then, that's not a valid argument for today, because it's
not even actually a valid argument. I run across this speaking on decolonization and anti-racism a lot, and speaking out against different things. Like in Canada, the first prime minister, said in these words, Canada needs to be an Aryan nation. And had all kinds of racist ideas. He said racist stuff about Black folks, Indigenous folks, Chinese folks with regularity. And people are like, he was a product of his time. The reality is, in the late 1800s, there was people calling him out for his white supremacy. There was politicians opposing him for his white supremacy. His effigy in the 1800s was burned in the streets for his white supremacy. Yeah. So we like to say, like, they're a product of their time. That's how people know, like, people knew it was wrong. People always knew it was wrong. And there was always opposition to that level of hatred. And so that is one of my biggest arguments against that, in art, in writing, in television, in history. We need to stop excusing history. People knew it was wrong. There was people fighting against patriarchy, against racism, against slavery, because they knew it was wrong. Yeah. And saying it was a product of the time also ignores the fact that the dichotomy between racism and anti-racism and those in the middle has existed for as long as they invented white supremacy 600 years ago. So it's not an argument, it's an excuse. We still have that level of racism. That actually has not changed.
Yeah, it hasn't.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that it also, again, boils down to the education in which we've been indoctrinated to excuse that, because, well, our textbooks were filled with those pictures and the textbooks were there to teach us history. And it's like, okay, but if there's abolitionists and Shakers and people who are actively fighting against these ideals, then it was equally, the argument that it was, if it's wrong now, then it was wrong then. What has changed about being human in the last 400, 600,000 years? What's changed about being human?
Yeah. Let us get on to 60-second tarot. I have so many nightmares about what I'm going to have to edit to keep it short. I am going to draw from Tarot Archetypal, which we now both have.
Yes.
And I'm so excited to have.
I'm so excited that you got, I got it a while ago and I wanted to share pictures, but I was like, no, Krista's still waiting on hers. I don't think it will be fair. Krista's the one who told me about it. I'm going to be drawing, I'm pulling from Sasurabi. One of my favorites.
Nice.
Okay, so we just show the cards.
Yeah, you can go first. What card am I drawing?
You're drawing the Three of Wands.
Ooh, the Three of Wands. Oh, I like that. This is a deck on my wish list.
A good deck.
Very nice. And you are drawing the Page of Wands. So we got some wands energy going. I'm gonna. Okay.
It doesn't have to be a literal interpretation of the card, right?
No, it does not need to be a literal interpretation of the card.
Okay.
Not at all. Let me know when you're ready, and I will get it started.
I'm ready.
You're ready? And I am ready, and let's go. Okay, so this time I'm a little bit more uncertain about what I'm doing. I think I'm going to go a little bit more freeform. My wands are trees. And I think my person is going to be like in a tree, looking out, standing on the tree. There we go.
Oh my gosh, it's already
All
done.
right.
Oh my god.
It is. It's so fast.
Oh my gosh. All right, well, do the best I can.
Okay, how did your page of wands come out?
Okay, so all right, well, do the best I can.
Okay, how did your page of wands come out?
Okay, so it's nothing like the card you showed me because can you see?
A little bit. What does it say?
So every time I think about Page of Wands, I think about pages being like students. So I always think of literal pages of a book. So it's a book, it says student of life, study of intention. And then I put a
I
wand.
like it.
Yeah.
Oh, that is nice. I really like it.
Yeah.
Mine is a very messy drawing, but I have 3 trees as my wands, and the person's up in the tree looking out.
Oh, I love that.
I have 3 trees as my wands, and the person's up in the tree looking out.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Each tree has the 3, like 3.
They do, and I wasn't even thinking about it when I did. Yes, my hand was more creative than my mind.
60 seconds is fast, and especially when you're
It is so fast
doing art, because it's such a meditative activity. Time kind of forget about time when you're doing art. So.
Yeah, but it's kind of fun. This is what I think I like about this portion. Yeah. Is it's kind of fun. Who knows? Maybe I'll end up putting out a deck of like 60-second drawings that I've created at the end of this.
It's been done before, and I would definitely be interested in that.
I will need at least 78 people to interview to get through them. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for joining me today, Havana. This was so much fun and so insightful. And yeah, I think what I like about these is these warm, enjoyable conversations about these difficult topics.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't always have to be so intense, and people can definitely learn, and it doesn't have to be intimidating. So I definitely agree, and I appreciate you asking me to do this.
Thank you so much. I will see you later. Have a good rest of your day.
You too. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.